You're in the right place if you've ever heard or uttered the following. If you use information the DM didn't give you, you're a filthy cheater. Or, we can't help but use the information we have in our head, so you might as well go ahead and use it all. If either of those sound familiar to you, don't worry. There's hope, and it's in this video. Stick around and learn how to walk and teach the balancing act that is metagaming in Dungeons & Dragons. Hey friends, my name's Timothy, though some people do call me Tim. I'm a professional dungeon master, and here on my channel, I help you improve your game of Dungeons & Dragons. Let's get to it. Metagaming has probably one of the largest stigmas in Dungeons & Dragons, except maybe 4th edition, regarding how bad it is and what kind of awful situations come up in our games thanks to its existence. Unfortunately, as with a lot of things in Dungeons & Dragons, the advice that people give is often to the two extremes. Either embrace it and just accept it and you can't do anything about it, so leave it alone on the one hand, or the alternative of metagaming is super bad and you should punish your players if they try to do anything because they're filthy rotten cheaters. The fact of the matter is that, as in most cases, the answer lies balancing down the middle. So before we dive into some actionable advice about how to improve the metagaming at your table, let's talk about something that isn't covered terribly often: the advantages of metagaming. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, one thing that people often forget about Dungeons & Dragons is that it is a role-playing game. And while metagaming does have a certain influence on the role-playing aspect of the game, it comes from an aspect that is important in a game, capital G. No matter how many arguments we might have over player skill versus character skill, it is important for a game to feel as if the choices that you are able to make are able to influence the system. It's important for you to be able to have a feeling of progression of knowledge and skill to be able to attain mastery of some form. Mastery of the rules in Dungeons & Dragons is one of those outlets that allows us to progress in the game from the rank neophyte first-time player to the veteran grognard telling everybody that their edition was way better. So while we might rail and rant about metagaming being a bad thing at our table, it is actually an expression of player skill increasing over time. Knowledge gained from previous encounters, from reading, from studying, from effort, translating into a player skill increase that allows that player to feel like they have more control over the game portion of their Dungeons & Dragons. Now, this isn't going to be something that appeals to every archetype of player, but it is going to be something that appeals to a lot of players, and it is an important aspect to keeping a role-playing game, and not some kind of joint improvisation experience. Though people often cite the argument that you can't stop people from metagaming at your table, they don't always take it to the logical conclusion of realizing that you are metagaming no matter how you react to the information that is in your brain. The fact that your player probably knows that a red dragon breathes fire is not the problem. The question becomes, how do they act upon that information? Because they have that information, they can't help but have it influence their decision, either to pretend that their character doesn't know the information or pretend that their character does know the information and act accordingly. One of the other advantages to metagaming is that it can reduce the amount of explanation that is needed in order for characters and their players to understand a circumstance that they're in. It allows them to make informed decisions about options that are presented to them without us having to drop back to the mechanics in order to determine extra information or otherwise spend a lot of time expounding upon an idea. When we present an option between two choices to the players and they don't have the information to go on, they're essentially just making a random guess. Whereas if they have the information and can metagame, then they can choose between the two options presented. Likewise, metagaming can lead to players having more creative solutions to problems that might be placed in their characters' paths. After all, you cannot determine a creative path to overcome something that you don't know is a problem. If we don't give our players the information, or if they have not already obtained it, then they can't decide to use a creative solution. All they can do is guess or go with the most obvious path. While your journey with metagaming will likely be a personal one, we'll also discuss ways that the DM can help others. But for now, let's focus on you. When it comes to your personal journey with metagaming, there's a couple of things you need to know. First and foremost, it's important for us to figure out when metagaming is an advantageous and good thing to include and when we shouldn't. When you're role-playing a character, it's okay for you to bring in the information that you have from the outside world sometimes, but other times it can be a real drag and bring everybody's experience down. An important question that you can ask yourself regarding a specific piece of information in order to avoid breaking the narrative is to use as an improvisational prompt the question, how does my character know this information? If you can answer the question of how your character knows the information, whether it's because they studied abroad in a foreign country, whether it's something they learned while they were working the docks as a young dwarven prostitute, whether it's just from a book that they read, a bard that they listened to, having that improvisational prompt and coming up with the reason why your character knows this information can allow you to keep that information inside the narrative instead of breaking it out to being just a, well, I, the player, read this book and I know this information. Rather than resorting to game mechanic conversations like, hey, this dragon is fire resistant, you can go the extra mile and say, fire won't work on it, watch out for the breath weapon, or other commands and shouts to your compatriots that are going to provide information and value without pulling people out of the narrative. Another question or two to ask in order to avoid some of the most common pitfalls is to ask yourself, what's most fun here? Is it more fun that I have this information and I bring it into my character? Or would it be more fun to feign ignorance as a player right now and allow my character to stumble through this circumstance? I have a player who is absolutely marvelous at this. An accomplished dungeon master, he is really good at yes-anding other people's ideas, at choosing when to bring information into the game and when to leave it out. And his mastery of that skill enhances everybody's experience at the table. Another question is to ask, what has my DM told me that my character knows? If my DM tells me the information that I know, that is the information that I should focus most of my attention on. If they have told me that I know specific information, they are implying that I do not know other information. I can always check and clarify that if I need to, but for the most part, running with what we've been given is a lot better than trying to add on and pitch our case as to why we might know more. That said, pitching your case is a wonderful method of gathering a buy-in from your DM when it comes to your metagaming. For instance, if you were to say to your DM, hey, because I studied at the feet of Zillinor Moonsong, the chosen of Saloon and famous bard, can I utilize this information, or would I know this specific information, or what would I know about this? By pitching to your DM your knowledge in character rather than your knowledge of the situation, you can ask him to give you the information that you're then going to utilize, and you avoid the metagaming thing entirely. But because you have thought about where your character might have gained this information, you allow yourself the opportunity to increase the odds that your DM will say yes and move you forward. Your DM, or you, if you are the DM, has a lot to say when it comes to how metagaming is going to play out at your table. Let's sit down and discuss it. As a DM, metagaming can take on a very positive or a very negative vibe at our table depending upon how we approach it. Often, I find that a lot of DMs run towards the extremes when it comes to metagaming, either just allowing it carte blanche, I did that, or denying that it was allowable in any way, shape, or form, I did that. But as we already discussed, the correct path is right down the middle. So how can you encourage positive metagaming at your table while discouraging the more negative kind? I have 3 simple suggestions to offer in that regard. First, we can ask how with the right intentions. Just like we'd already talked about, understanding the how of how your character came upon the information that you're seeking to bring into the game world is an important aspect to making metagaming a positive thing. By asking how to our players as a dungeon master, we ask them to engage with that question. When they come up with an answer, we can yes and build upon that to give them the information that they already have and desire, or to legitimize the information that they're acting based upon. This is a means of training our players into the kind of behavior that we want by offering that question and accepting the answers that are given. I say it with the right intent very carefully in that particular sentence, however, because it is a fairly common accusatory question of how does your character know that? And we're not looking for that kind of interaction. Ultimately, if that player has the information and is going to use it in the game, you don't necessarily want to create any major hassle and pushback. What you truly want is to guide them towards using the information in the best possible manner. If we have a spirit of guiding and helping our players when we ask the question of how does your character know that, then it might sound more along the lines of, what experience taught your character this information? Where did you learn that information? What did you go through? We can be more careful in how we do it, but most of the time, truly, it's simply about having the correct intentions, because it is our tone that is going to give away our ill intentions if we truly are just being accusatory. Secondly, we can go out of our way to provide information to our players without breaking their immersion. A lot of the time, a common problem that I still fall prey to is that we wait for our players to initiate an information gathering with us by asking us a question like, what does my character know? Do I know this? Do I know that? Instead of proactively making sure that when something new is presented to the characters, that the players are informed of what their characters know. We can use passive knowledge checks or actively rolled ones in order to determine the information that is available to the characters and provide it to them as soon as it is relevant, instead of waiting on the back burner for them to come to us begging for scraps of information or hoping for the ability to use information that they, the players, have that they're not yet sure whether or not is available to their characters. Third, we can use metagaming to enhance the story by specifically calling out things that are not known and perhaps give suggestions upon how that information could be obtained. We can also make sure that when we deliver information to players, we tell them how they know, whether or not it was from common stories or something related to their background or skill choices. Especially when it's related to the skill choices that characters have made, we want to make sure that those players realize that their good choice led to the information that they are now receiving and being able to act on in their game. Metagaming, while it might be the elephant in the room, is not the bugbear that is out to get us. Metagaming is an opportunity for us to flex our player skill in a game that otherwise rewards a lot of random chance. Embrace metagaming at your table, acknowledge that you can't avoid it, and then find ways to lean into the story of that in ways that will enhance the experience for everybody at your table. Thanks for watching.